Well, the seasons have changed, and so too, in some ways, has my opinion about the Kamado Joe Konnected Joe. So, would I buy the Konnected Joe? Not for me, no. But should you? I actually think so. Let me explain. So while I might be a little bit of a dinosaur with these things when it comes to automated control of your grill, I'm the type of person, if given a choice between automatic transmission, manual transmission, I'm gonna go manual transmission all day long. And same is true when it comes to tending to my fires. That happens to be, for me, the most enjoyable part. But despite as hard as I might try to share this with friends, family, neighbors, attrition list over the years has piled up for Team Traeger or grills like that because, again, the risk for some is just too high to jump into doing it all yourself. And so had there been a grill like the Konnected Joe available at that point in time, I can even think of a couple examples. Instead of being Team Pellet, we would have a few more folks in the grilling with the Kamado Joe family. And so under the guise of the fact that this grill welcomes more people into a hobby that I absolutely love, I'm going to give it, 2 thumbs up. I also love, compared to some of the things that I wasn't thrilled about with the Pellet Joe, that my favorite accessories like the slow roller or the Joe Tisserie, for example, just couldn't be used in a Pellet Joe. And this seemed like a giant step backwards for me because I absolutely love interacting with things like the Joe Tisserie, for example. And so I've already confirmed the slow roller works great, the Joe Tisserie works great. And so versus the Pellet Joe, I think the Konnected Joe is leaps and bounds ahead in terms of providing the full Kamado Joe experience. And if you want to turn the power off, unplug it, you can use it 100% offline, which speaks to my inner love language. And so I think from a capacity perspective, the Konnected Joe appeals to many new to grilling, new to smoking users who might otherwise be put off by complexity. Now, speaking of complexity, if I want to get the absolute most out of my Kamado grilling experience, I've come up with things like my double indirect setup. But this is using slow rollers, deflectors, water pans. And if I put my neighbor in mind here, immediately they're just gonna tune out. His expectation of wanting to use the grill is turn the power on, follow the app what it says for ribs, drop the ribs on, and come back 5 hours later when they're done. And so I can appreciate that perhaps some of the things that Kamado Joe was going with here by excluding one of my favorite accessories like the slow roller is under the guise of simplicity. It just becomes too much for different setups, different configurations. And so while I like to sort of put myself and many friends in the advanced category, which is why, there's things that just don't appeal to me when it's sort of a simplified, keep it simple version, I can appreciate for the new user that the barrier to getting started when you start seeing all of these different configurations, all these different setups, just increases the risk of, I'm gonna mess it up and I don't wanna do that. I'm just gonna go for Team Simple. So I appreciate that Kamado Joe, in this case, knows exactly who they're after for in this market, which is, for example, my old neighbor Aaron, where he ended up Team Traeger. And if there was something like this at that moment in time, I think he absolutely would have felt comfortable taking the plunge because it's simple here. Power for the automatic fire starter, power for your temperature, use the pit probe if you'd like, and you can track along your cook, and everything you need to get going is right in the box. So if the Kamado Joe Konnected Joe is good enough for friends that I can think of that I've lost along the way to other brands for the Wi-Fi powered connected options, why is it maybe not something that's getting my ringing endorsement for me? So first is form factor and size. The favorite model that I have in the Kamado Joe lineup is the Big Joe. Now you can do absolutely everything in a classic size. We even did a 17-pound Packer brisket on this 18-inch grid real estate. So you can absolutely make things fit, but you have to do some finagling in order to get the same quantity of food in there. I got 2 racks of ribs, they're large ribs, a brisket, using some wood chunks to try and get everything fit and manage some overdoneness on the ends of that brisket even after a trim. With the Big Joe, I love that I can do a full meal. I can have maybe something on one side, some sides on the other side, and I can do my entire meal on the outside, or if we're having a larger gathering, there's just much more food to share. So So the first hesitation that I have with something like the Konnected Joe is the size. Now, if they came out with a Big Joe version, I'd be pretty tempted to look at my Big Joe Series 1 versus the Konnected Joe Big Joe, if there ever is such a thing, and maybe swap, because I've actually come to appreciate some of the automation features and being able to turn the temperature of the grill down from anywhere because we are connected to Wi-Fi. I can control that remotely. That's a pretty handy feature, and since I've done as much as I can do at this point comparing the Big Joe 1 to the Big Joe 3, it might be nice to have a completely different experience with some of that automation built in. And all my accessories that I've acquired over the years are Big Joe size, so whether it's the Dojo, the Joe Tisserie, which I had to borrow the old one that I sold with my Kamado Joe Classic 3 to make that Joe Tisserie video, soapstone, if I didn't mention that, charcoal basket, you name it, everything that I have is Big Joe size, and I just don't want to sort of restart collecting all of my accessories in the classic size. So that's, again, very personal and unique to me, but that's one of those things. The second hesitation, and while for me, I become comfortable after testing the waterproof nature of the Kamado Joe Konnected Joe and held my power washer on it for 2 minutes. I showed a short clip in that video, but that was over 2 minutes of pressurized water. The IPX4 outdoor splash rating, to me, has me satisfied. But, this is not a matter of what James is comfortable with, it's what's written in the user's manual when it comes to things like warranty. So, over many years, a year, 2, 3 years, if you were to leave this outside and expose it to rain, technically, in the manual, it says you're not supposed to do that. It also says that, by the way, in many of the most popular pellet grill models or any other grill that is using outdoor electricity. So this is not unique to the Konnected Joe. It's just something as a fan of manual fire control, I don't like to think about. But this is something you're going to have to tackle whether you're looking at the Konnected Joe or any other automated grill, is the fact that you want to cover it and limit its exposure to the elements, even though I, for one, after that power washer test, which is more aggressive than any rainfall. If it rains as aggressively as that power washer, I've got other problems than worrying about my grill. I got to be worrying about my house and my basement flooding. My third sort of hesitation or lukewarmness is, again, just the fact of you're going from advanced down to simplicity. And while I think for a new user, this is critical, but I love flexibility and customization. And the 3-tier divide and conquer rack on the Series 3, where the grill grows 4 inches, just opens up that much more flexibility in terms of how we configure our grill, as well as getting even more distance from our fire. And so I just don't like, again, being forced down into the limitations and space constraints that you get. While it might be better for the new user, I think it takes away some of those options that you can have in terms if you are comfortable playing with your divide and conquer rack with different levels of indirect, direct cooking. That's part of the fun, again, once you're fully comfortable with how to control things. And so my last hesitation is what would be great versus what would be amazing. And so the Konnected Joe, once it gets up to temperature, I will put it in the great category. It can maintain flat lines incredibly consistently. And I had to learn and adapt in terms of where the automatic fan control is versus what I see on my temperature gauge. And if you're using the coal stacked to the back, like I saw in my rotisserie chicken video, there's about a 60 to 70 degree difference here. I've also had to adjust how I like to start my fires, because again, the automatic fire starter with the fan will overshoot common low and slow temperatures. But once you've got things locked in and loaded, this does an amazing job at regulating your temperatures. And if you want to adjust it either in person or remotely, it's incredibly responsive. So that, I think, is a high bar for the actual performance. What could be better than that? Well, Kamado Joe has always blown me away with their innovations, and there's two things that I would love to see them push themselves a little bit further. If there ever is a future generation down the road, maybe some things that would be great is something like maybe adding an extra power plug. Where I am here outdoors, I have sort of one extension cord which has a single plug, which the Konnected Joe takes. When you want to use something like the Joe Tisserie, all of a sudden you need another plug or a power bar or something like that. That was a $3 dollar store fix, so it wasn't hard to fix it, completely solvable, and I know I'm being nitpicky, but it would be just an amazing surprise and delight moment if you were able to take an accessory designed for the Konnected Joe and the Jotisserie and just have an extra outlet that motor could feed off of the same power supply that the Konnected Joe would need. The other thing here that I think would be absolutely as amazing, now it significantly more expensive, maybe even double the price of this, but the high-end Traeger models come with wireless meat probes, which I'm not sure why actually in the Traeger you need wireless meat probes, because there isn't, to my knowledge, a rotisserie option. But one of the best accessories for a Kamado Joe is the Jotisserie, and this is where a wired cable that works with the built-in 3 temperature probes that come with the Konnected Joe don't work. And it would have been outstanding if something like the Jotisserie came with an integrated food temperature controller that could work with the Jotisserie and be 100% wire free. Instead, I have to use something like I already have, and I like it, you know, the meter probe or any other wireless probe that you might have, because I can't use the built-in controller. I know these are super small niggles and they're easy to fix, whether it was a dollar store plug-in or if you have or able to get a wireless controller, it completely solves that. So that doesn't impact our ability to use and enjoy the grill by any means. It would just be that surprise and delight, like that's Kamado Joe at their absolute best. But I recognize all these things add, again, complexity when you start getting into wireless probes and pairing things in distance, as well as cost. You can get the Konnected Joe with the slow roller for about 50 bucks less than a Series 3. And so I do appreciate that for the new user, if they want to get some of those Series 3 features, you can step up and close that gap and actually save a couple bucks in the process. So while the time has come for us to convert our outdoor pergola back into what it actually is, it's an outdoor entertaining space. We have some couches, our fireplace over here for enjoying food with company and friends and neighbors. That means the Konnected Joe has to move elsewhere. So I don't have a ton of space. I'm going to be storing it in the garage, so we won't see it as often. I will say my closing thoughts on it is it has changed my opinion. Again, I opened with a strong bias of wireless powered grills aren't for me, and they still aren't for me, but I can say I appreciate even more the type of consumer that this appeals to. And if I have another neighbor that I'm not able to talk into going at it yourself with a live fire, and it's not that difficult to control, and I swear to the grave, it's not that difficult, because you can turn out flat lines on the manual Kamado Joe easier than any other brand Kamado grill that I've ever used. I'll take that with me to the grave. I will be happy to relent if I'm not able to convince them and say this is an outstanding alternative. It's simple, it's easy to use, and it works. And if you, again, in terms of those advanced features, if we want to call the Series 3, it comes at a couple $100 discount. So I don't think you could do any better for those type of criteria for that consumer, even though it's not for me and the one that I would rush out and go buy. So that's it for today, though. I'm James from Soaking Dad Barbecue signing off. If you've got any other questions about the Konnected Joe or anything else, be sure to let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to get to those as quick as possible. That's it for today. I'm James from Soaking Dad Barbecue signing off. Don't be afraid to fire it up.